You guys can see this, correct? I trust. If not, I'm going to trust you guys to let
Yes.
me know, as always. All right, so let's get going here. Love this quote. It's a quote from Seneca: "Luck is where opportunity meets preparation." You know, the very first time I heard that quote was actually as a kid. I was a caddy at a country club up in Morris County. And there was a professional amateur tournament going on, and Gary Player was the pro that was part of this tournament. And he held a little bit of a clinic for the members, to give them some golf tips. And that's what he said. Luck is where opportunity meets preparation. And as a professional athlete, I think there's a lot to be said for that. But for a professional anything, I think there's a lot to be said. Is are we prepared, right? And so what do you have to do to get prepared? The key points we're going to talk about today include making sure that you're qualifying your sellers, making sure that you're not going on listing appointments that aren't really ready to go yet. We're going to talk about knowing the inventory, how important that is, knowing your numbers. What numbers do you need to know? Being able to explain the paperwork, knowing what to say, preparing your pre-listing guide. We're going to talk about that today. Although if you want to do a much deeper dive on the pre-listing guide, I'm going to point you back to the YouTube channel, the Bergen County Partners YouTube channel, because the entire Win with Sellers course series is on there. And there's a full hour-long presentation on how to prepare your pre-listing guide. But we're going to talk about it today. We're going to talk about handling objections, and then just some basic considerations that you have to think about in terms of how you're going to approach this. So let's start with number one: only meet with qualified sellers. I think sometimes in our eagerness and our excitement, we have somebody who kind of raises their hand a little bit and lets us know that they're interested in possibly selling their house. And we rush, we go right to an appointment. When can we get together? And that isn't really what you want to do. We want to make sure that everybody, before we meet them, you look at these three rings of ready, willing, and able. Are you really ready to sell your house? Are there things that have to be done first, right? Are you really able to sell your house? Do you have the authority to sell it? Does someone else have a voice in that? Do you have enough equity in the home that if you get fair market value for it, you're going to be able to have a deed transfer? If not, you're going to have to be what we call a short sale, and that can be done. It's just more complicated, right? Are you really willing to sell your house? Are you willing to do what it takes to get your house sold in the market of the moment, right? That's something we've got to assess. And the easiest way to do that is to guide them through a series of questions, right? We have lead sheets, right? So where would you find these lead sheets? Well, one of the places is if you go into the coursework for Win with Sellers on the KW website, you'll find some there. If you go into the toolkit for Ignite 2.0, which is the Ignite class that we teach, you'll find lead sheets there. And if you guys, if you're newer and you're not really familiar with where to find all these different things, then what I would suggest is jump back on if you can, 3 o'clock this afternoon when I do an open office hour, and I'll share the screen. I'll walk you through how to find all these things. But what a lead sheet does is it just guides the questions. It guides the questions so that you ask the right things so that you can really determine, is this the right time for us to be meeting, or should we defer a meeting to a later date and we stay in touch, right, until that time comes that it's more appropriate? And so get a copy of these lead sheets. And I'm looking really closely at the screen here, and God, my eyesight's, when your eyes get close to 60 years old, you don't see this font very well. But things like, how did you hear about me, right? That's a really important question. It has nothing to do with motivation, but we do want to find out anytime that we get a lead, how did they come to us? What part of our lead generation is working? We want to know that so we can do more of it. But what's causing you to, be in the market to sell your home? Where are you going? Why is it important to you? Those are the kinds of questions that we're going to need to ask to determine this level of ready, willing, and ableness, right? And here's the thing. You're going to hear me say again and again and again, and if you've been on some of the classes I've taught, you've already heard me say this, that the new real estate algebra is the formula that says ABC equals BS. And what does that mean? Well, there is this adage in sales, always be closing, ABC, always be closing. And it's a pretty popular thought out there. And there are a lot of trainers who will say, always be closing, always try to get the appointment. And, some of you may remember the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, right? Where they had this hard driving real estate manager that was going to come in and whip this group of agents into shape. And coffee is for closers. You remember that movie, right? Remember those scenes? And he just kept pushing people to close, to close, to close. That's BS. That's bad script. That is beginner's strategy. You don't always want to close for an appointment. You want to close for an appointment when it's time to meet, right? One of the reasons why people don't like salespeople as a general rule is because they think we're too damn pushy. We do need to guide people through the process. We need to cultivate that relationship and probably get them to take little mini steps of things to do to get ready to meet. But if we're not really ready to put the house on the market, it's not time to go on a listing appointment. Now, that said, there may be appropriate appointments that you'll go on. They may come to you and say, look, we're going to put our house on the market in 6 months, but we'd like you to kind of do a walkthrough and help us think through what should we do to get ready. Would you go on that kind of appointment? Of course you would, right? But when we're talking about going on a listing appointment and really with the intention of going through the listing presentation and going through a consultative process to try to get a signature, if we jump the shark and we get out there way before they're ready to do it, it's just going to be a waste of your time. It's going to be a waste of their time. And it's going to cause them to feel that you are just pushing too hard. So use a lead sheet qualifying like this. And guys, we're going to start doing more script practice after Labor Day. Mondays and Tuesdays, I've blocked out on the calendar that we're going to teach a script on Monday and role play it to death on Tuesday. And some of the scripts that we're going to practice is actually going through these qualifying conversations. The more we do it, the better we are. Okay. Step number 1, only meet with qualified sellers. Now, we've got to know the inventory, because part of what we're going to be asked to do is to help the sellers price the home appropriately, which means we're going to have to, as we talked about last time we were here, we're going to have to get comps and pull comps and start to think about pricing strategy. And guys, we have to know these properties that we're using as comps better than the seller does. I have made the mistake, guys, and part of what I'm trying to do with a lot of these classes is just save you from the embarrassment of doing some of the stuff that I've done. Because if there's a mistake that could be made, I made it. Early on, I went into some of my listing presentations and I pulled comps that were very, very close to the subject property, and I didn't know them. I never had been in them. I wasn't previewing homes well enough, or perhaps I had gotten into the business after those homes had already gone under contract and I never really got to see them, but the sellers knew them because their friends lived in them. And so when I tried to use them as comps and said why their home matched up or didn't match up, they were really able to say to me, you know what, I don't think this is a really good comp because there's things about this home that you don't seem to know. And I do. The moment that the seller knows more about the comps than you do, you lose your authority and you lose your ability to be really seen as the expert. So one of the things that you've got to be doing is just previewing property all the time. Right now, every single day, set up your hot sheets on your MLS so that new things coming to the market, new things that have gone under contract, that you can see those. They're fed right into your computer, but you got to get out and see them. You got to get out and see them in person. In Ignite, we ask people to try to preview 10 homes a week in person. Whether you do that as an open house on Sunday that you're going to go visit, whether you do that during a broker's tour. Frequently, the brokers will hold an open house during the week just for the agents, or whether you just make an appointment to go preview it on your own. We've got to get out there and see it. And I'm going to encourage you to go back to the toolkit and Ignite. And in that toolkit, there's a lot of different tools and things that you can use. One of the tools in the toolkit is this preview home guide. And it kind of walks you through as you're going through the home, filling out what kind of style is it? What kind of heating system does it have? Things like that, so that you really, really get to not just walk through the house and say, yeah, this is pretty, this is really nice, but you really, really get to study it and you really get to understand it. That's the level of knowledge that you're going to need to have, especially when it comes time to do the CMA and you're going to have to adjust comps to turn them more like the subject property. So I really love this preview guide. And one other thing that I would encourage you to do is start to get good at pricing homes. And so what I would encourage you to do is when you are physically walking through the home and you're seeing what it is, we know what the asking price is. We know that because it's listed. But what I would do is I would practice going to the MLS, as we talked about the other day, pulling some comps and actually kind of doing your own CMA for that property based on the comps that you could pull. And try to come up with a decision, a guess as to where do you think, based on the comps and based on your growing knowledge of the market, where do you think this price is going to land? And we don't know for sure because it's still on the market. But on your preview sheet, what I would do is right next to the address, somewhere on this sheet, I would just put it in a pen. You know, $455,000 is my guess. And then watch and see what happens. When does it close? What did they get? How good are you at making those assessments based on the comps that you have available in the moment? That's a skill that we just don't practice. What we don't do is we wait until we've got an opportunity. We wait until somebody comes to us and says, hey, I want you to come and give me a CMA. And then we do it in real time with a real client. I'm not a fan. You know, I'll tell you something. I come out of healthcare. You know, doctors practice on dead people for a reason. And I don't mean for that to come as flip as it is. But in medical school, when what you do is life or death, you don't get to try it the first time with somebody who's still alive. And that's why we have cadavers and all that sort of stuff. And that's a terrible analogy. I get that. But I'm trying to drive home the importance of practicing and getting it right before you do it in real time. I see here that says, even if you don't have a seller or a buyer in chat, can you still make an appointment to preview the home? Absolutely. Not only can you, I'm asking you to. And when you go into the showing software to schedule that appointment, it's going to ask you whether or not you are bringing a buyer or whether you're just going to preview it on your own. And make sure that the seller knows that this is a preview. What I don't want the seller to do is have the expectation that there's a buyer that's coming through, they get all excited, and then after your visit, they call their listing agent for feedback, and the listing agent calls you for feedback, and you say, oh, no, that was just me. I was just previewing. You know, now what happens is the seller's frustrated, the agent's a little frustrated. Let everybody know right from Jump Street, and there's a way to signify that in the showing time software to let people know that it's a preview visit, okay? But you got to do it. You got to get out there and do it, and we need to do as much of it as we can. Okay, what numbers do you need to know? I said you need to know your numbers. Well, the market numbers, right? If you're going to be the market expert, you have to know the numbers. And so we're talking about things like inventory levels. How much inventory is there in the market? You know, how many homes are for sale right now? Is that number going up or is it coming down? All of these numbers that we're going to talk about today, what you're really trying to look at is a trend, because any single data point is a useful piece of information, but how the market looks like it's moving over time is better. And so how much inventory is there? How many homes on the market right now? How many homes in your specific neighborhood? How many homes in your specific price range? Is that number holding constant? Is it going up? Is it coming down? Days on market is another important statistic to track. How long is it on average for a home in the marketplace before it goes under contract? Now, what you're going to find is you want to be faster than the average. Your days on market averages is kind of, it's the mean actually. What they do, and if you remember going back into school when they talked about averages, and you have the mean and the mode and the median, and you're like, oh my God, all those numbers, what do they mean? The median is if you take the list from top to bottom and you go right to the middle of the list, what would that number be? The mode is what number comes up the most often in that set. But the mean is if you added them all up and divided by the number in the set, what does that number look like? And when the days on market is calculated, they use the mean. And that's not a great number, because sometimes what happens is you get a builder who buys a property, puts it right back on the market right away, and it's a tear down, and they're going to tear it down and they're going to build it in a new house. And what they're advertising are the specs. So you can sort of see some pictures, some elevations, but the house isn't really built yet. And many times it takes time. Buyers are frequently not willing to put down a deposit on a house that isn't built yet, or at least started. And so sometimes new construction you'll see is on the market for 300 days, 400 days. And homes like that, when they finally close, they throw off your days on market number. But what we want to know is, what is it? Is it going up? Is it coming down? The trend is the most important, because it's a way for the sellers to gauge the rules of the road that they're going to be trying to sell their house in. So the inventory levels, are they going up? Are they coming down? The average days on market, is it growing longer? Is it growing shorter? List to sale ratio. What does that measure? It measures what percentage of the asking price did the seller typically get. And there's two different ratios to look at. One of them is, what was the original asking price versus the final sale price, right? That's what we call the OLP, original list price to sale price ratio. And the second one is just the final asking price to the sale price ratio. And in most markets, what you're going to find is buyers typically they take the bait. When the bait gets close enough that they want to take it, what you're going to find is the final asking price to sale ratio is usually somewhere between 94 to 96%. You know, in most markets, the homes do not go for full price. There's some negotiation that happens. And in most markets, 94 to 96% is about where you would expect it. Now, in a hot market like we have right now, where there's so little inventory and interest rates are so low, when you start to take a look at what's recently closed, what you're going to start seeing is that a lot of these homes did not go for a discount. A lot of these homes went very close to full price, or at full price, or way over full price, because there's so much demand. I'm very aware of markets in New Jersey right now where over the last 30 days or so, the average days on market was like 3 days, and the list to sell ratio was between 120 and 150% of the asking price. Yeah, that much over, right? And so knowing those numbers, knowing what's current, being able to guide the seller in the consultation process with good factual data of what's happening right now so that they can make a better decision about pricing, that's what we want to do. And if we don't know these numbers, we're not going to know how to coach them, how to guide them, right? There's another number here that I think is probably, for me, one of the most important ones. It's called absorption rate. Does anybody know what the absorption rate is and what it reflects? Anybody heard that phrase before?
Is how many inventory divided by the amount of days. So
say it again. Inventory divided by what, Javier?
The amount of days we have, or I mean, of the how fast the inventory is going to be consumed.
That's what it measures, right? For sure, right? Somebody else was going to jump in. Who else is going to say something on that?
Me, but same thing.
Same thing. Okay. Yeah, what it is, if you think about the word absorption, if you had a paper towel and you spilled something on your countertop, you put the paper towel on it, it would absorb all the liquid. And what absorption rate tells us is not how quickly would it take for this listing to sell. That's what days on market sort of gets close to. What absorption rate says is at the current rate of sales, how long would it take for everything in the market to be absorbed? Now, understand, that's a pretty theoretical idea. There's no way that everything in the market is ever going to be absorbed. There's some houses that are just never going to sell. Sellers aren't motivated enough, who knows what. But what we're trying to figure out is, how brisk is the market? How active is the market? To use a fishing analogy, are the fish biting, right? And there's a couple different ways to figure it out. I'm going to tell you the way that I prefer. The way that I prefer is to take all of the active listings in the marketplace and divide it by the number of properties in that same marketplace that went under contract, right? Not still in a Turner review, but actually came out of a Turner review and the status changed to under contract in the last 30 days. And when you take those two numbers and you divide them, what does it tell you? Well, let's do the easy math, right? Easy Friday math here. If there's 100 homes in the marketplace And in the last 30 days, 25 of them went under contract. I take 100 divided by 25. And what does that answer become? Who is my math whiz who can unmute and tell me that answer? Somebody knows that.
4.
There you go, Miriam. You get the cookie today. For what? Well, 4 months. If I'm dividing 100 homes by 25 a month, then in 4 months, all 100 homes should be gone. That's how long would it take to absorb the market. Now let's do it a different way. If I had 100 homes for sale and only 10 of them went under contract in the last 30 days, 100 divided by 10, now my answer is 10 months. It would take 10 months for all of the homes in the marketplace to get absorbed. And why that's important is because 6 months, think about it this way. Think about a seesaw, right? If I go, markets are kind of like seesaws. They go back and forth. And the thing about a seesaw is if you go to the playground and there's nobody riding the seesaw, it never is just standing perfectly level. It's just going to lean one way or another way. And markets do that. They tend to lean to be more favorable to the buyers sometimes, and they tend to lean to be more favorable to the sellers sometimes. This calculation helps us to gauge that. When we have 6 months of absorption, maybe 6 to 7, kind of right in that range, that's when the market is kind of balanced. And at that level of absorption, you know, home prices are actually still going up. There's enough demand for home prices to keep going up, but they go up at a healthy pace, not a crazy pace. They go up at maybe 3, 4, 5% a year. And that's, you know, a good, healthy market. Now, when the number comes down, meaning that more homes are going under contract in the 30-day window, when the number gets lower than 6, does that favor the buyer or does that favor the seller? Who has a thought about
Seller.
that? It favors the seller, right? Because if there's more demand for what I have, if I'm trying to sell yellow highlighters and everybody wants one, I'm going to hold out for a really good price. But if I'm selling yellow highlighters and everybody's like, dude, I could care less about your yellow highlighter, I don't want one, then in order for me to sell it, I'm going to have to discount it. And so knowing where the absorption rate is gives the seller some guidance in terms of how much power do they have in this market. Right? 6 months is kind of stable. Lower numbers favor the seller. Higher numbers favor the buyer. The higher that number goes up, the less demand there is, the more the buyer has negotiating room. Now, there's a question in chat that says, won't homes keep adding up every day? And the answer is yes, they will. And won't additional homes go under contract every day? And the answer is yes, they will. But what I want you to do is I want you to track these data points that we're describing consistently. I said a trend line is really what you're looking to establish. Any single data point is interesting, but it can sometimes be misleading. What I want to do is I want to calculate the absorption probably twice a month. What I've found from experience is that once a month, you miss kind of some of the subtleties of what's going on out there. Once a week is probably too OCD. You don't need to do it that frequently. But a couple of times a month, beginning of the month, middle of the month, end of the month, however way you want to do it, put it on your calendar as a task to complete. Because if you don't do it, you're going to get busy and you're going to forget. And then what's going to happen is your data points don't reflect kind of a consistent trend, right? What I want to do is 2 times a month, what's the absorption rate? Is it trending upward? Is it trending downward? The same with inventory, the same with days on market. And the easiest thing to do is just get an Excel spreadsheet or a notebook or whatever you want to do and just record them. And it really only takes a few weeks, couple of months of data points, 3, 4, 5 data points in a row, you'll start to see where it's going or where it's leveling off. That's the kind of information that makes you a valuable consultant. So we've got to know. Now, what I will tell you about absorption, just as a couple other key things, your MLS calculates absorption, in my estimation, the wrong way. Because what I asked you to do was to calculate it by taking the actives and dividing by the number that went into an under contract status. I know that some of those deals are going to fail. I don't care. What I also know is that the buyer demand was sufficient that the fish took the bait. Now, if the fish can get off the line before the fisherman brings them in, well, that's on the fisherman. But the fish took the bait. That's what I'm trying to measure. And what a lot of other folks do sometimes is they calculate it not by looking at the under contracts in the last 30 days. They look at it as the number that closed in the last 30 days. And my problem with doing that is that it's not as current a measure, because what closed in the last 30 days reflects deals where the fish took that bait 45 or 60 days prior. And it's just not as current a measure of what's going on. So I would rather you use under contracts than solds. And what your MLS does, which I think is frankly, I don't know why they do this, but they do, is they take all of the sales that closed in the last 12 months, in the last year, and they divide it by 12 to come up with their monthly number. And they use that number to divide into the actives. My problem with doing it that way is that it takes all the seasonality out of the market. Some months you're going to have a lot of activity, some months very little. If you take the whole year and divide it into little equal chunks, you're going to lose the accuracy of the fluidity of a market, right? So do it this way. This is a better way to do it. And just get into the rhythm of doing it. Every 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, every 2 weeks. Inventory levels, days on market, absorption rate, list to sell ratio, boom. Just get into the habit. You're going to start to become the economist of choice in your market, right? You will be the one who knows better than anybody what's going on out there. Now, interest rates. What's going on with interest rates and how does that impact the seller? Well, what we know is that the less expensive money is to borrow, the more buyers can afford. And the more buyers can afford, the more likely it is that the seller is going to be able to achieve a higher price. And guys, just sidebar here, that's the role of the Federal Reserve. What the Fed does in part is manipulate the interest rates to try to make money easier to borrow, less easy to borrow, to try to curb inflation. If prices are going up, if housing prices are flying right now, and they are right now, because we are in a worldwide global pandemic and the economy is like completely upside down. And so the federal government is just basically giving people money. Say, here, just take it, spend. We got to keep this economy going. When that happens, that's when you start to see home prices going for 120% of the asking price or 130% of the asking price. And that's not sustainable. What the Fed's job is to try to make money more expensive to borrow, to manage that, to regulate that, to slow the market down, to try to prevent inflation. Right now, we're just going no holds barred, right? And the thought is that just pouring money into the economy is what we need to do right now. But what you need to know is that there is a correlation between interest rates and a buyer's purchasing power. And that matters to sellers because the more purchasing power the buyer has, conceivably the higher price the seller can ask for. Here's the ratio. It's a 9-to-1 ratio. That's the number. Just memorize it, 9-to-1. And what that says is for every 1% that a 30-year fixed mortgage changes upwards or downwards, a buyer's purchasing power changes by 9%, upwards or downwards. So to make that real, just to give you some context around that, if today we had interest rates, and I don't know what the rates are exactly today, but let's say they're 3.5. If my buyer qualifies for a $500,000 mortgage at 3.5% interest, the monthly principal and interest would be the same as 9% less if the mortgage rate went to 4.5. So if the mortgage rate went from 3.5 to 4.5, my $500,000 buyer becomes a $455,000 buyer for the same monthly payment. And that's important because that gives a buyer some sense of what they can afford and to some degree, what level of urgency is there based on where interest rates are trending? And the same with sellers, right? So watch those interest rates. And right now, guys, if you are a seller, I can't think of a better perfect storm to be a seller in than we are right now. And I say that because buyers can just get money for cheap. And there's so little inventory that is good, and there's so much demand. If I needed to sell, man, I would be in the market right now, right? So know that relationship, those are numbers that you have to know. And then finally, what else do you have to know about the market? You just have to kind of know the feel, the vibe, the mood from being out there. You know, when you're working with buyers and are they excited about this opportunity right now with all this demand, with so little inventory? Are they intimidated by it? At some point, buyers are going to say enough. It's always what happens, because in the energized market where prices just go up and up and up and up and up and up and up, with money being so cheap that that doesn't really impact your monthly payment as much. But at some point, when the Fed takes the foot off the gas here and interest rates start to go back to where they should be, buyers are going to say enough. I can't pay this much every month. My wages didn't go up as much. You know, I might not have even had a job with COVID, right? So know these numbers, guys. Track these numbers, know what they are. If you have any questions about those, reach out to me. I'll walk you through those. Javier, your question says your system will be lower. Don't you think so? I'm not sure what that means. Can you unmute and ask me that one?
No, my question was, if we normally you use sold homes.
No. Normally you use under contracts. Some people use solds, but the majority of people use under contracts.
No, but the MLS use sold homes.
Right, they do. Right.
So now, since you're using a bigger divider, which is houses under contract.
Under contract in the last 30 days. Not everything that's under contract. I'm just looking at a subset.
Now I realize that. So your number is maybe lower, but it's more accurate.
It's accurate. And it's because everything, whether it's sold or it's under contracts, it's always in that last 30-day window. That's what I'm trying to find. And you're going to see that the numbers don't necessarily change all that much. When markets are heating up, what you're going to see is under contracts are bigger than solds in that same window. When markets are slowing down, you're going to see solds are bigger than the under contracts. And that's just more information for you to kind of get a feel what's going on here, right? Okay, let's keep the process moving here. The paperwork, we're going to get into the paperwork. We're going to do a deep dive on the paperwork in a couple of sessions, be able to explain the paperwork to the sellers. One of the things I want you to do is print off the paperwork, the contracts, the listing agreements, and go through them and make sure you understand what they say. I would actually fill it out as if you were listing your own home for practice. Just fill it out, see what goes where. If you want to fill out a copy of it and scan it and send it to me, I'll be happy to review it and give you some feedback on it. But the key things you have to be able to have talk through is the CIS, right? The Consumer Information Statement, which is the document that says we can represent buyers and sellers in a variety of different ways, right? We can represent buyers, we can represent sellers, we can represent both parties with both parties' consent, or we could actually just put the deal together and do the mechanics of this, but not really offer any relationship as a fiduciary, and that's what we call a transaction broker. Most companies in New Jersey, most traditional brokerages like ours and the big name brokerages, we don't really practice transaction brokerage, but some do. But one of the things we have to be able to do is explain what that means and get a signature on that, right, with our sellers. We have to be able to explain what the contract says well enough that if they have a question and say, can you help me understand this this subsection here? What does this mean? Bulk, what's the bulk sales transfer piece in the contract? I'm not sure what that means. You got to be able to explain that. So if you don't know, I'd encourage you to kind of go back and beef up and study and figure that stuff out. Dual agency, what is it? How does it work? We've got to explain what is given up by the parties. When you think about dual agency, which is interesting in New Jersey, because the way we know that agency runs with the brokerage, right? The thing we've got to remember is if we have the same broker then both agents on the buy side, on the sell side, if we have the same broker that is supervising us, then we're dual agents. Now, the thing we have to be careful of here is understanding that Keller Williams is a franchised business model, which means even though we all are doing business under the umbrella of Keller Williams, every one of our offices is a different company with a different broker. Ridgewood has a different broker than Rutherford, has a different broker than Woodcliff Lake, has a different broker than Fort Lee, has a different broker than Tenafly. Every one of our offices is a separate company. And even though we all have signs that say Keller Williams, we're not dual agents unless we're doing a deal with somebody in my own office. And that's important, because what is the thing about dual agency? Why do we need consent? Because if you think about what a fiduciary provides, and you go back to real estate school, and I remember the acronym OLD CAR was the one that I learned. O, obedience. L, loyalty. D, disclosure. C, confidentiality. Well, here's some tension between disclosure and confidentiality. If I'm representing both parties, I can't disclose what I also have to keep confidential if I'm representing both parties. And so people need to know that that's something that's going to be given up. And some people, have some hesitation around that, but we've got to be able to explain that. All the different disclosures, lead paint disclosures, COVID waivers, all that stuff. We've got to be able to talk through all the paperwork. The permission to advertise documentation. What is that? Well, believe it or not, the listing agreement gives us permission to put it in the MLS, but it doesn't give us permission to put it in Facebook or to put it on the internet and other websites. We need to actually get their permission to advertise it that way, and that's the permission to advertise form. So we got to know the paperwork, and what I will tell you is we're going to go through the paperwork in next week. In the short term, if you want to learn how to do the paperwork, I'm going to point you to a really cool resource. So give me a second here. I'm going to try to stop my screen. And I'm going to try to share my screen again. I'm going to bring you to, I'll do it this way. I'm going to log in right from the very beginning so you can see what I'm doing. Let's share this screen. This is my Google screen. Now, most of your market centers have your own internal office website. It's hosted by a web serve company called Weebly. Not that that matters. But the web address for that website, for the most part, is your office's telephone number. And I'm going to point you to Ridgewood's office website because they've got some recorded videos on there. We have a Bergen County Partners YouTube channel, and some of our own market centers maintain their very own, not YouTube, but their very own websites that have some training videos. So what I'm going to share with you is the telephone number for the Ridgewood office is www.telephone number. You ready? 201-445-4300.com. That's it. It's the phone number.com. And when you hit it, oops, you know what I just did? I think I typed that into the chat instead of into the website. Here, let's do it here. You type it into the website and here's what happens. It says you didn't type it right. www.201-445-4300.com. Let's get it right. All right, you're messing with me, Google. Now you're making me look bad in front of my peeps. Don't do that. 201-445-4300.com. Let's try it again. There we go. And so what we see here is, this is the Keller Williams Village Square website. And here you start to see Zoom live stream classes, and you can click on that. And it's going to take you to a place where you can start to see lots of different classes here. Now, those are the live streams. What am I looking for here? I'm looking for the coaching classes. Where did they move it to? Here it is, recorded classes. It's right here under Zoom live stream. It's recorded classes. So when you go to the recorded classes here, you can link right back out to the Bergen Partners channel if you want to. But these are the coaching classes. So you click on this one, and what do you find? There's a couple classes that I've done, a couple classes that Sally Ponchak has done. Oh, look, how to complete the listing paperwork. Right there, recorded for you. How how to pull comps, how to do absorption rate with Larry Gruber right here, how to do a listing presentation with Sally Ponchak, how to do a virtual listing presentation with Jen Parsekian. Guys, there's some great resources here. And even if you're not in the Ridgewood office, I would encourage you to kind of go and watch this. We're actually going to watch that as a way of kind of teaching how to kind of do the paperwork next week. We're going to watch that and dissect that together a little bit. But I want you to kind of know that that resource is there. It's the telephone number 201-445-4300.com, and you will get to that website. And it's a good one, right? So there's the number right here. Write it down. Now, know what to say. When you get face-to-face, you've got to know what to say. Guys, ultimately really perfecting your skills and honing your craft of doing a listing consultation, it's a skill that takes time and it takes practice. And the very first time that you do it, you're not going to be anywhere near as good as you will after you've done it time and time again. Just like anything else, mastery is time on task over time. One of the challenges that we have in our industry, though, is that you're going to have to get out there before you've mastered this. You're going to have to take some at-bats before you've really figured this out. And so as a shortcut, as a way of helping you, we are going to give you, I'm going to give you a listing scripted presentation. I'm going to show you where to download it. And you're just going to simply, if you had to do one this afternoon and you had no idea what to do, you're going to print this off and you're just going to read what it says, right? And let me show you where to find that. Stick with me again. I'm going to go back to my screen share, see if I can find out where I'm going this time around. Okay, we're going to go back to share the screen. I'm going to go to the KW website here. And where am I going? I'm going to go to Ignite, but I'm not going to go to Ignite 2.0, which is the new version. I'm going to go to the old Ignite class. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Education. That tab takes you into the Keller Williams University, and you see on the very first row, 2 versions of Ignite. This is 2.0, this is the original. Go to the original one. And what you're going to do is click on it. It's going to take you to what we call the landing page. It describes what the course is, and as you scroll down, do you see where it says Student Resources right in this little red button? Click on that button. And what it will do is it's going to take you to all the different sessions that are associated with the first iteration of Ignite. And there's some great stuff in here. I think the 2.0 version is even better, but there's still some stuff that's in here that are good. But go to the bottom here, very bottom where it says additional resources. You're going to see in this middle column, listing presentation with the agent script, listing presentation to give to the client. Guys, it's essentially the same thing. It's just that the scripted one says when you get to the page that you're on, okay, now say this. And you say what's on that page. And then both of you turn the page. And it says for you, okay, now say this. And guys, if you had to do one today and you had no idea what to do, as long as you can read and you can manage your emotions so you don't throw up on your shoes, you're going to be fine. You will see people have taken listings with that scripted presentation. Now, it says right on the cover, agent copy. Do not make the mistake of giving the client the scripted copy and keeping the unscripted one. Agents have done that in the past in their nervousness. And is it the best presentation? Is it got the best graphics and the best pictures? No, not at all. It's not. But the important thing is it guides you through what to say. Now, here's what we're going to do. I was talking to David Radney. Some of you guys know David. He runs the Push program. He and I were speaking earlier this week. We're going to take the very good looking listing presentation. This is the template that lives in Command, right? Lots of great pages in here, and they're really polished looking. You can build out something that looks terrific. We're going to take David's Push listing presentation script, and we're going to marry that script up to that downloadable so that you can kind of create your own scripted version with one that's prettier and nicer, and you can give the nice, clean, updated Command copy to your client and have a copy for yourself that's scripted out so you know what to say. Guys, that is not the way you're going to do it forever. It is the training wheel version, but if you had to do one today, you'd be good. I see some chat lights popping up here. Any chance you can email that to me since I'm on the road? You know what? I can absolutely do that. Anthony, do me a favor. Can you unmute and just give me your email address right now, or can you type it into chat? Chat would be better. If anybody wants that today, I showed you where to find it. But if you just can put your email address in chat, when we're done, I'll email that to you and the client copy as well, so you can sort of see side by side how they look. And those will be things that we will practice and role play going through that conversation, so you know what to say. Anthony, I've got it. Thank you. Anyway, knowing what to say is important. Let's get back into the PowerPoint here. Give me 1 second here. Okay, back into the PowerPoint. Now download that one. And you know what? Over time, you're going to find your own voice. You're not going to need the scripted one anymore. You're going to find a way to, and what I will teach you in the Winwood Sellers course is ultimately a track, a sequence, a process. What do you have to accomplish in the first step of this consultation? What are you trying to accomplish next? What are you trying to accomplish third? And the more you get comfortable with that track, the more you can achieve those goals without having to read it, it doesn't have to be as word for word scripted. This is just the training wheels. But they're good to have when you're first learning how to ride the bike. Otherwise, you fall down and you get bunked up a lot. Ultimately, you'll find your own voice. You'll learn how to sequence that conversation out step by step by step. And that would really be the ideal. That's what we're working towards. But this is something that you can get rocking with right away if you wanted to. And since this is new agent launch, we're going to just give you a tool, right? A tool to run with. I see chat lighting up here, so it looks like I see a lot of email addresses. Cool. Guys, I will get that to you later today. Onward. The pre-listing guide. We are big fans of doing some heavy lifting before you show up. When we show up on the listing appointment, what we're trying to do is we're trying to go through the process of establishing rapport, getting folks to like us and to trust us and to see us as the subject matter local, hyper-local expert, and to make a value proposition that's compelling enough that they want to hire us. And sometimes there's things that we want them to know about that would make that appointment go smoother if they knew certain things. I don't want to have to spend all of the time that we're together teaching you about stuff. And so the pre-listing guide is designed to kind of provide some pre-information. For example, those numbers, those market statistics that we talk about, that's stuff that can go into the pre-listing package that you send out in advance to give them a little bit of an overview. You can talk a little bit about how important staging is, and I would in the pre-listing guide. I want to talk about how important staging is, maybe with some before and after pictures in the guide so people can visually see that and they can understand it a little bit before you get face-to-face. You want to be able to put your testimonials and your awards and your stuff. Look, when I get face-to-face, this has to be about you. I mean, I use this analogy sometimes. If you ever think about the very worst date that you ever went on, what made it the worst date probably was that the person across the table spent the whole night talking about themselves and didn't seem to have any interest in you whatsoever. Nobody likes that. When we get together on the listing appointment, this has to be about your wants, your dreams, what's going on in your world. What are you trying to accomplish? I want you to know about me. I want you to know about my team. I want you to know about my success. I want you to hear my testimonials, but I don't want to waste our valuable FaceTime bragging on me. I'll put that in the pre-listing guide. I'll send it out there. I'll let it do a lot of the heavy lifting. And you have to have that prepared and ready to go. Now, back to the Bergen County Partners YouTube channel. In the course series, Winwood Sellers, that is there is a full hour session on creating this pre-listing guide, what should go in it, how you should think about delivering it, how to differentiate yourself by using it. But we are big fans of getting that guide into their hands first and then showing up for the appointment later, and not much later. You know, same day, probably not same day. They need some time to look at it and to digest it. But certainly within the next day, no more than the next 48 hours, right? We want to share the important information with them that pre-sells us and predisposes why they should pick me. And then I can kind of focus on them when I get there. Okay. Now, we also have to be prepared to handle objections. You know, you're going to get some objections. And so let's talk about what objections are. Objections are not conditions, right? There's a difference. A condition is something that's a legitimate obstacle that has to be solved before we can proceed. I'll give you an example. We go back to ready, willing, and able. We're assessing, is the seller ready, willing, and able to put the house on the market? And maybe when you're doing your assessment, what you find is they're willing to sell the house. They're ready to sell the house, but they're not able to sell the house because the house right now is being held in trust, and that trustee needs to sign it over to the seller so they can sell it. There can be lots of different conditions that have to be solved. Maybe the house needs to be fixed up. I could put it on the market today, but if I did that, I wouldn't have as good an outcome as if I took 3 months and I fixed up the broken porch and painted the house and did those things. Those are conditions that if we solve those, we can move forward. It's different than an objection. What an objection is, it's a delay, it's a delaying tactic, it's holding back, it's based in an irrational fear. It's not about something that needs to be done. It's something that I'm afraid of that's causing me to hesitate. And there's a limited number of objections that you're going to get in a listing appointment. People are going to object to your fee. You know, they don't want to pay your fee. They think it's too high. I never get the objection that says your fee is too low. I will tell you this, though. There are plenty of times when if you don't go in and establish what your fee is, you're going to find sometimes if you're nervous, if you're anxious, if you just kind of lowball and say, you know, I don't feel confident in myself, so I'm just going to ask for, pick a number, 4.5%, something like that. You're going to find plenty of sellers who'll be thrilled to give you that. But they would have given you more had you been courageous enough to ask for it. You're going to get objections around your fee. You're going to get objections around the price. I think it's too high. I think it's too low. I want to go higher. You're going to get objections as a newer agent that you don't have enough experience yet. How are you going to handle that? You're going to get objections from people that say, you know what, I have a family member, I have a friend who's in the business. There's only a set number of them that you're going to get. And we've got to learn what's the methodology of how do we handle those objections? Now, old school models of objection handlers that used to work really well and now work sort of okay. I love Mike Ferry. The Mike Ferry organization and his son, Tom Ferry, are icons in this industry. But in the past, and I cut and paste this right from the Mike Ferry manual, the objection handlers were based in logically trying to explain why the person should move forward. Have you ever tried to logic your way with somebody when they're afraid? They cannot hear you. If you've got a child who's afraid to jump in the pool because they're afraid to swim, you can try to out-logic them all day long as to why there's nothing to be afraid of, and they're not going to do it because they're afraid. And so the old school models, for example, here is we'll save the commission if we sell it ourselves. This is a FSBO objection. And the old school model was, I agree you can save the commission by selling it yourself. Are you aware today that there's over how many homes for sale? And last month, only this many actually sold. And that's this month's of supply and blah, 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 blah. When people are afraid that they are going to overpay, when people are afraid that if they don't net enough, they're not going to be able to achieve their dream, fear shuts off the logic center in the brain. It's a physical fact that the front neocortex gets disengaged when the amygdala lights up with fear. And so what happens is that used to work a lot in the past, old school. Now I think buyers and sellers are just savvier. I don't think these kinds of objection handlers that move immediately to trying to tell people why they should not be afraid work as well. What's another way to do it? An objection handler that it's good is the one that we said feel, felt, found. Let's go back to commission for a second. Hal, I don't want to pay your commission. I think it's too high. Feel, felt, found would sound like this. Hey, look, I can appreciate that. I can understand how you feel. Other people have felt the same way before. And here's what they found. By hiring my team and I at 6%, our ability to generate a better return, a better market, a stronger market, our ability to deliver a better outcome for you has shown that they will make more money with us at 6% than with that discount competitor who's only charging them 4%. That's a feel, felt, found strategy. I understand how you feel. other people have felt that way before, and here's what they found, and then you tell your story. That's good. Here's what's better. If people are afraid, we've got to probe that fear a little bit. One of the things that we find in research, and I'm going to go back to brain research here, one of the things that we know for fact is that when we give people the opportunity to talk about what they're afraid of, it starts to lose their grip over them. Think about, anybody who's been a parent, who's had a kid who's afraid of a monster under the bed or a thunderstorm at night. We can try to logic them all day long as to why there's no such thing as monsters and they're not buying it. But when we start to ask them, what are you afraid of? Well, tell me what you're afraid of. And they start to say, I'm afraid that monster is going to come out from under the bed and he's going to get me. And just the fact of actually talking that through, that begins to dissipate. If you were to actually look at the brain under a magnetic resonance imaging, you would see the fear centers of the brain beginning to shut off when people talk. So probing is the key. And the APAC model of objection handling is acknowledge, probe before you answer, and then confirm. It sounds like this. You know what? I can appreciate the fact that 6% is a lot of money. It is a lot of money. Let me ask you, what is it that concerns you the most about paying 6%? And they'll start to tell you, if I pay 6%, I won't have enough money in net profits to do what I want to do then. And then suddenly, when they've got a problem that we can solve, then we can layer in an answer that can solve that. And once we come to a problem that we can agree that we've solved together, we can confirm that problem solving would work and we can move forward. The probing is the key here, guys. I think the old school objection handlers don't do that well enough. Even better, big fan of Jeb Blunt. His book, Objections, is to me one of the very best books out there. Jeb is, in my estimation, one of the very best sales trainers in the world across all industries. And he has a 4-step model that I think is even better still, because it really taps into neurolinguistics. And he starts with what he calls the ledge. The ledge is a pattern interrupt, which actually causes people to have us respond in a way that they never expected we would, and it gets our attention. And once we've got their attention, or they've got, then we can start to probe. And here's how that sounds. You know what, Hal? I don't want to pay your 6% listing fee. I think that's too much. A pattern interrupt response would not be an acknowledgement. I can appreciate that. A pattern interrupt would be saying something like, I'm so glad you brought that up. That's exactly what I was hoping you were going to say. Now, what seller would expect a real estate agent, when they give an objection about fee, to say, I'm so glad you brought that up. I was hoping you were going to do that. None of them would. And because you did something so wildly unexpected, it gives you a chance to kind of take a break here and collect your thoughts. And now they're curious. And they're paying more attention when you ask them to articulate their fear now. They're going to do it at a deeper level. And then once you have that same model, it's a variation on the APAC model. Once we know what they're afraid of, then we can challenge that faulty reasoning. We can provide a reality-based solution. But this model, I think, actually does a better job of tying into the neurolinguistics that works. So my point is this. We have to expect there's going to be objections. There will be. We also have to be prepared to deal with them when they come. There's a limited number of them. What would I say if they object to the fee? What would I say if they object to the level of experience that I have? Feel, felt, found is a good one. Acknowledge, probe, answer, confirm is better. And I think this model here that Jeb has in his book, Objections, is better still. The last couple considerations, and we're going a couple minutes late here, so I'm going to wrap this up here. The last couple considerations that we have to think about is, are we going to try to take this listing in one step, or are we going to try to do it in 2 visits? And the difference between the two is, in a 2-visit listing appointment, I'm going to go see the house. I'm going to take a look at it, see what it is, walk through it, so that I can go back and pull the right comps to do my CMA. And then I come back on visit number 2, and we've got the completed CMA that we're going to use in the listing presentation. And what will dictate whether or not you're a 1-stepper or a 2-stepper to some degree is going to be your preference, I guess. But the more you know the market, the more you are able to assess in real time, because you know the market so well. Think about your own neighborhood where you live. If I was to ask you to describe a 4-bedroom, 1.5 bath colonial style home built in the 1940s with average finishes for your neighborhood, average size lot for your neighborhood, my suspicion would be that you could probably benchmark or ballpark a price for that house plus or minus $100,000. You have a range in your head because it's your neighborhood and you know your neighborhood. And then when you go in to see that house, if it's better than you expected it would be, it's going to be at the high end of the range. If it's worse than you expected it to be, it's going to be at the low end of the range. But you can make those adjustments in real time if you know the market well enough. And if you don't, you're going to have to do the research. The problem with doing 2 steps is that there's a pretty good chance that between your step 1 and your step 2, a stronger agent's going to get in and steal your lunch money. And so if you're going to do it as a 2-step, which you might have to in the beginning, or you might have to if you're being asked to do an appointment in a market that you don't know, you're going to have to maybe do it as a 2-step. Then I would caution you to caution the sellers to slow this process down, to let them know that this is an important decision and this is the biggest asset of their life. And making a mistake here could cost them a lot in home equity. And so I know that you told me that you're going to meet with another agent tomorrow, but please do yourself the favor and don't make any final decisions till I get a chance to come back and share with you what I have to say. You want to really slow the process down if you're going to 2-step it. Now, if you're a 1-stepper, and I'm going to encourage you to become a 1-stepper, you're going to go in there, you're going to do it all in one shot. You're going to take that listing, and you may get an objection that says, I don't want to move forward because I'm still scheduled to see Mary from XYZ company tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock. You know what? Here's an objection handler. You know what, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I can appreciate the fact that you want to honor your word. What would be the worst thing that would happen if you told her that you had listed with us? And they would say, you know what, I just don't want to do that. I'm a person who lives up to my word. And you say, you know what, I have great relationships in this market. If it would help you, I'd be happy to pick up the phone. I can give Mary a call and let her know that we've decided to list the home today. And if they have a buyer to bring, we would honor that relationship and we would love to sell it to one of their buyers. And you would be stunned how many times sellers would say, you would do that for me? Oh man, if you would do that for me, we can do this tonight. And you call and you cancel that appointment. Now, don't be a jerk, right? Don't be a jerk. If this isn't your chance to pick up the phone and say, hey, Mary, you suck. I got the listing. You're burned. No, don't do that, because you're going to need Mary later. Mary is a cooperating partner in this market. The relationships you have with the co-op agents will largely determine the kind of business that you do or don't do. If you're seen as a jerk, you're not going to have a favorable relationship, but it's simply a call. You pick it up and you say, you know what, Mary, I'm here with the Smiths and we actually have decided to list the home tonight. And as a courtesy, they wanted me to just reach out to you and tell you that they appreciated the opportunity to talk to you thus far, but that they really hoping that you would have a buyer. And you just do it with dignity and class and you just let Mary off the hook, right? But the more times that you can do this as a 1-step, the better chances you're going to have of closing. Statistically, here's what the numbers say. Your chances of getting back in to close it and getting that appointment in 2 steps drop by 70%. You have a 70% better chance of getting it if you do it in 1 shot. So to that point, get to be the master of your market, right? The faster you learn your market, that's why I want you to preview, the better you're going to do with that. Last but not least, what to do next, send the pre-listing paperwork out. Give them some homework. Right? Give them some homework. I'm going to send you this pre-listing package, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and there's a questionnaire on the very back page. I would love it if you would complete that questionnaire. Would you be willing to do that for me before I come, so that if you have any questions, we can address them at that time? Give them some homework to do. It starts to get them committed to the process with you. And it also can be a test on motivation if they don't do it, right? Avoid scheduling the follow-up appointment more than 48 hours out. Confirm the appointment before you go. You would be surprised many times when people commit to give you a yes. Sometimes yes is just a head fake. They say, yeah, I'll meet you tomorrow at 4 o'clock, and they don't have any intention to do that. They just want to get you off the phone. So confirm the appointment before you go. Be sure that all the decision makers are there. You cannot get a listing agreement signed if all the signers are not in the room. Do not go on this appointment if the husband is working late, or the wife is working late. We need both players in the room, or we're going to have to defer to another time, right? And then finally, be realtor ready. Show up and be professional. Be early. Be not just on time. What my dad used to call Vince Lombardi time when I grew up. He was the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. And he used to run his practices like this. If you show up for Lombardi's practice 20 minutes early, you're already 10 minutes late. You should have been there 30 minutes early. That's what I want for you, is be prepared and be on time. And if for any reason you're running late, have a courtesy to call and let people know. People will give you grace if there's a legitimate reason. But if you show up late, the very first thing that you communicated to them is that you're not somebody who can do what you say you promised to do. So don't do that, right? All right, we're going to park it here. We went long, but I hope that there's some value in what we talked about today. Anybody have any questions? I see some emails showing up into the chat, so I will send you the scripted and the unscripted listing presentation to people who put their email in chat. If not, guys, you can just go to the Ignite page and download it for yourself. In fact, there's so much good content there in that additional resource section that I pointed out. I'd encourage you to go there and take down all of that. There's a buyer's presentation that's in there, not scripted, but there's a buyer's presentation. There's lots of good tools in there.